I'm Josh Aldrich. I'm the editor at the Spruce Grove Examiner, Stony Plain Reporter, and I'm joined with Josh Thomas, our sports editor at the paper. And we just want to talk a little bit about the new Westwind Arena complex, or multi-use entertainment facility that they're talking about for the Westwind area, just off of Century Road and Highway 16 for Spruce Grove. The three options for the project were unveiled at council on Monday, and they're all three of them are pretty different.
Yeah, they're three entirely different options. I think that's kind of what the design company was aiming for. The first is just a base twin pad arena. It would have large lobby space and some space for breakout rooms, things like that. But it would just be very, very much a base twin pad center. This one actually wouldn't be for the Westwind Center. They said that could kind of go anywhere in the city. It really didn't feel like this was an option that was viable from the get-go, to be honest.
Yeah, I think it's basically they're looking for context out of that, what a twin pad kind of costs as a base model for them to go off of.
Absolutely. So option 2 is a 2,500 fixed seat arena and community ice pad. It's going to have your office space your second pad's going to have 250 seats, space for meeting rooms and storage. I guess the big thing here is that you're not going to have telescopic seating, which you'll hear about a little bit later. But yeah, I guess there's not too much more to say on that.
Yeah, it seems like it's pretty basic in terms of what the amenities are around it. It's basically a 2,500 seat rink with a 250 or 500 seat, I've heard both, for the second seat, or for the second arena, and then it has kind of the basic necessities to kind of go along with it. But still, you can use it for many different things. Hockey, during the summer you can put lacrosse, soccer, all those different types of things. You can have concerts, smaller conferences and workshops, that type of thing as well.
And then we had the option that dominated the most of the conversation during council. That's the option 3, 3,500 seat event center. It's going to have telescopic seating, and basically it's going to it's going to have the sound and lighting capabilities to be considered a full multi-use event center. They expect to bring things like, I guess, large gymnastics tournaments, have the ability to kind of interchange between ice and concrete sports. Basketball, I think they said, might have been a
basketball, circuses, concerts, yeah. Larger concerts,
things of that nature. It's also going to have party rooms, a $2 million auditorium flex space, which will kind of serve some of the needs of the arts community in town. A catering kitchen, which was a huge point as well, so that they could hold large size events and be able to, I guess, have an in-house kitchen for that. And then, of course, a home locker room and accommodations for the Spruce Grove Saints. That would be included in the second option as well. In the first option, the Saints aren't really a part of that deal. They'd kind of have to take a look at the Grant Fuhr going forward, or if they're going to have a new home.
Yeah. So that's a big part of this. The Grant Fuhr Arena is a very old facility, and it's quite small. Great atmosphere in there when it's full, but it only seats about 1,500 or so. So it's kind of at its capacity right now. It's an old facility, doesn't have really a great dedicated space for the junior A team. So that's all part of this. And with this project, the idea is to have it as a economic driver for that Westwind development. They're going to have some high density residential, I think, going over there. They already have some commercial being built, but this arena would be to also attract a hotel and convention center that way. So the two would play off each other. They'd drive kind of some off-site spin-offs for Spruce Grove. The problem is, and this is where I kind of fall off the rails. It sounds like a great project, either 2 or 3, but when the council was talking about the off-site economic impacts, it was sold quite strangely. I'll get into that a little bit. They were estimating the economic off-site impact, and that's where a lot of this comes down to. Do you have that sheet?
That's the sheet I gave to you. Yeah, off-site expenditure, direct and indirect.
Right.
So they have an off-site expenditure, I guess annually, They're predicting for the option 1, which is the base twin pad, $6.7 million. Interestingly enough, option 2 would generate somehow less at $5.5 million to maybe slightly more at $7.1 million. And then option 3 is expected to generate $13.3 million to $16.9 million a year. I know that you have some issues with those numbers.
I do. It's about what events are going to be attracted and the consistency of those events being attracted to Spruce Grove. Over the course of 30 years with the project, they were looking at kind of a positive impact on the community for option 3 of with all the construction factored in and all the rest of 220 million roughly, 240 million roughly for the off-site impact money that was going to come to Spruce Grove, and it was going to be far less, about 49 million thereabouts for option 2. Now, for that to happen, that building would need to be packed regularly, every week, every month. You'd have to have full seats in there to do that. Now, the problem with this is for Spruce Grove, we sit in the shadow of an 800,000 capital city in Alberta. And Edmonton has many facilities already that's going to host a lot of these concerts. It's going to host a lot of these conferences or trade shows that I have a hard time believing Spruce Grove is going to be able to lure away or host a similar event in Spruce Grove that's going to drive that traffic here on a regular basis. It comes down to a lot of the concerts or acts out there, they have written into contracts where they can't have another concert within within a certain radius of that facility. Just in Edmonton alone, you have the Edmonton Expo Center, which used to be the Northlands Convention Center. You have Shaw Conference Center downtown. You have the Winspear. You have a whole bunch of facilities, Alberta Jubilee Auditorium, that can already host a lot of these events. I'm not saying Spruce Grove won't get any of these. They'll get the odd concert, but I'm curious as to how many on a regular basis that they'd be able to get. Also, the Saints, I don't think that they would fill that need either, even with 30 home games in a regular season.
No, I don't think they can fill that need, and I think that if you look at the project, they had a direct comparable in there. They actually spoke directly comparing some figures to the OHL, which I think is a mistake to compare a junior A team in the AJHL to numbers that an OHL team or I guess a better comparison would be a WHL team would bring in. But even looking at the slides they had in the project, if they used the Meridian Center in St. Catharines as a direct comparable. That's the home of the Niagara Ice Dogs of the OHL. They recently built that actually when I was in school at Niagara College. And that hosts the Niagara Ice Dogs and the Niagara River Lions, and those are two kind of semi-pro teams that are bringing in revenue and bringing in butts in their seats on a regular basis. We're only going to have one here, and it really is a step under. And in a community where you're really trying to grow junior hockey, you're really trying to get more focus on junior hockey, I don't think you want to create an atmosphere for those kids where it's 1 out of every 3 seats is filled. Because if you look at the championship last year, the Saints won the AJHL Inter-Pipeline Cup. They had 1,499 people in their building on during their game 4 of their final series. They ended up closing it out in Okotoks in game 5. But they wouldn't even fill half of this 3,500 seat building on a championship game. That's not an atmosphere that I think the players want to play in, and I don't think that's an atmosphere that you want to go to if you're trying to grow junior hockey in your community. Maybe if they're talking about growing Spruce Grove, 60,000 people down the road. Maybe, but I just don't see the days of junior hockey with 3,500 people in the seats on a regular basis ever kind of returning.
No, and those numbers are pretty much the same across the board. The highest average attendance in the AJHL last year was just over 1,300 fans per game. The comparison point for me, even at 2,500 seats, is the Encana Center in Camrose, where the Camrose Kodiaks have roughly the same attendance as the Saints. It's just a shade under. And that building, gorgeous building, right now I think it's the best building in the league. But half empty, the atmosphere isn't great. It's not very good at all. Beautiful building, great organization in Camrose, but it feels half empty. It's like going to Commonwealth Stadium in Edmonton with the Eskimos. They have 30,000 fans in there. It's a 60,000 seat building. It feels empty. Great fans there, great. They do a lot of good things, but it feels empty. It kind of hurts the atmosphere. But it also goes to because the finances on this whole thing are completely undecided at this point. It all depends on what the partner communities, whether it's Town of Stony Plain or Parkland County, are willing to contribute to the project, as well what they're able to get from grants from the province of Alberta and the Canadian federal government out of Ottawa. So that all kind of plays into their funding model. Regardless, there will be long-term debt, which even the first option that they go with, there'd be long-term debt for the city and the local taxpayers to take on. So one of the options that they had for this was a ticket surcharge. And if you're going to look at a ticket surcharge and you're trying to sell it as you're going to fill the building 60 nights a year, or however many nights a year they figured they'd be able to fill it, well, if one of those tenants that are going to fill up half those dates only has a third of the capacity filled, you're not going to necessarily use that ticket surcharge to the full extent that you think you're going to be able to do so to cover the cost of the building. So that comes back to, well, then it's the taxpayers that are going to have to come up with that. So there is a lot of risk in a building like this. I think it could be a very good project for the city. And even if they don't fill to capacity 60 nights a year, I think it still could have a very positive impact. It comes down to how they're trying to sell it to the community at this point. I think there's much better ways to do that as well.
Yeah, I think you can't sell it as a building that's going to be filled and it's going to create, millions and millions of dollars yearly in offsite revenue. I think you have to be realistic, and I think that one of the biggest points that Mayor Stuart Houston made was that it has to fill the needs of the community, and I really do think the facility has to be done right. You look at the flex space in there, and I think there's an opportunity there. The Horizon stage does not serve the needs of the arts community, in Spruce Grove. It's a great facility, and as a 400-seat building, it serves the high school well, but it does not serve the needs to the full extent for the arts community. And I think that they have an opportunity to kind of fill that need if they're going to be the full-on event center here. A $2 million flex space that kind of felt like an add-in, I don't think is the right answer there. And that's kind of when you start to get into mix and matching the two options, which the designer said you didn't want to do. So I think it's interesting to see where they're going to go from here, because it needs to be done right, and it has to. I think that, as I said, the biggest point Mayor Houston made was it needs to serve the needs of the community.
Yeah. Well, and Councillor Cyril Turton talked about that in the during the meeting, during the presentation on Monday, is that they floated the idea of it being a multicultural center on top of it previously, and he didn't like it as a fit then. So to kind of shoehorn in this flex space, which isn't even really going to be that many more seats than the current Horizon Stage Theater, it just felt, like you said, like an add-on. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. You talked a little bit about the adding on here and there, and pretty quick here, a 2,500 seat building with all these same features is going to cost very similar to the 3,500 seat building. But at that point, it's kind of looking at what we really need in this community. One of the things that isn't going to be served by this building is one of the top recreational priorities for the region, which was an aquatic center. Now, Stony Plain might be looking at something like that, or maybe there's other potential possibilities for that down the road. But this is only filling part of the recreational need that's of high priority in Spruce Grove, which is getting the the ice sheets in there and finding a new building for the Saints. I don't think the Saints are in risk of leaving Spruce Grove at all, but to treat a franchise, to treat a community partner correctly, I think something like this is needed. So an aquatic center is still needed. One of the other big things that was needed is kind of they kept talking about a climbing wall, but is more part of an adventure type of skills kind of park for the community. That was, I think, number 4 on a recent list of things that they kind of needed for this community. So there's a lot of things that they can do with this. I don't think the project is dead by any stretch, but I think what the end result is going to be is not what we saw at council on Monday, and they're throwing out some pretty aggressive timelines, looking at an opening of a couple of years down the road.
Yeah, so they're looking at an opening in September of 21, and obviously that's to accommodate the Spruce Grove Saints. You're going to want to get them in there as soon as you possibly can to kind of maximize the revenue that is going to come from there. But in order to do that, you need council to kind of finalize the engineering and design process between now and the end of 2019. I don't know if that's a timeline that, like right out the gate, that they're going to be able to meet, just because of a lot of the questions that councillors had. It seems like they are going to kind of have to go back to the design process and really mix and match a little bit and find the right fit. And then obviously the negotiations with the Saints are set to take place in August. That shouldn't be too hard to work through, I'm sure. The selection of the general contractor is set for February and March of 2020. Construction is set to start in May of 2020. Again, that's kind of an aggressive timeline. And then the management team would be set in October, and the grand opening would be set for September of 2021. Again, I feel like it's aggressive. I've heard elsewhere that it's others within the community feel that it's aggressive, but it is the vision. It's a vision that has been in the works for a long time now, and I know that council, it's a top priority for council, so it's a possibility.
Absolutely. And again, there's a lot of economic impact that can come out of this. The arena itself, they're predicting, would attract as many as 1,200 full-time permanent jobs permanent jobs, whether they're full-time or part-time jobs, to that region, and then 3,000 construction jobs to get the thing built. So there's a lot of good things that can come out of this. My concern is about how it's being sold, and if you're going to sell me on this arena, sell me on the arena and what it can actually do. Let me know what is a realistic number for these impacts. They did have trouble finding comparables for Spruce Grove, being a city of this size next to an 800,000 citizen city, or population of 800,000. But the comparisons that they did pull were not really accurate. So it's kind of sometimes tough being the mouse next to the elephant, but we do have to be realistic about what the economic impacts could be for a building of this nature. So lots to be determined over the next few months, and there's going to be a lot of public engagement out there, so definitely make sure you get out there and let councillors, let the mayor know about what you want for the building, and what your thoughts on the current proposals, all of which I think are up on the City of Spruce Grove website. Or you can check the Spruce Grove Examiner, Stony Plain Reporter for our full report on the projects.